There we go. Okay, welcome to the April 6th JupyterLab weekly call. If you would like to speak about something in today's call, please add an item to the agenda. If you have something that will require more conversation, please add it to the additional discussions. So if you think you'll need more than, say, 5 minutes, please add it to the other section. And let's get started. My name is First. I just wanted to announce to everyone that I have a new job. I joined QuantStack on Friday, April 1st, and I am very happy to be there. I will continue to work on Jupyter, and hopefully we'll be able to do a bit more work on Jupyter than I could before, but there shouldn't be that much difference in your interaction with me vis-a-vis Jupyter, because that's what I'm there to do. I want to take the chance to thank Two Sigma, my former employer of 4 years, for allowing me the latitude to spend so much of my time on Jupyter and things that I care about. And yeah, nothing but good things to say about them. And that's it. That was my update. And thanks for the congrats. Fred, you are up next.
Hey guys, so we spoke about it, I think, for the two last week. The plan is to do a JupyterLab 3.4 release. As a reminder, last Wednesday we decided to let up to Friday for before freezing the list. Alex just proposed a last minute 2 days ago, but I think it's fine, especially because feature has been merged this morning, I think. This
yes,
European
thank
time.
you again for letting that slip in there. That helps our team a great much.
And thank you from me for reviewing some PRs. So this is the list. Out of the one that are still open, there are the two that have been reviewed by Alex. This one, about code mirror go-to-line, and this one about search and replace comments. So they are good to go. So they will be merged soonish, let's say. And I think the two that are pending, no, there are maybe 3 that are pending work. There's the one of JSON on the side toolbar. I don't know how much you imagine you still need to work on, except feedbacks.
I actually listed that under my agenda. I got some great feedback from you, Frederick. Thank you so much for that. Incorporated your textual and code suggestions. So I am looking for, when I say I'm looking for feedback, really I'm looking for an approval on it. I think this is just about ready to go, but I don't want to tip the scales too much. Please take a look at that. So
I will have a look for a review, and I think, like, from the code point of view, I have seen it already a couple of times, so probably on my side, if it's not already ready, it's about to be, so it should be good. Unfortunately, Eric has to drop off, and I know there is still some issue on that one, so I don't know. And there's the one, I don't know if Mike is there. I think that's the one of Mike about scrolling tabs in the tab bar. That's really the one I really don't know what's the status. I don't have the full list of everybody at the same time. So
I'm here. Yeah, I will be trying to get it ready soon.
Okay, so, but maybe what we can do is we could start, let's say next Wednesday, doing a beta release, and so that we do a candidate last week of April. Does that seem possible for you, Mike? As it will be the only late feature, let's say. Okay. So I propose that as a plan. Like I think every PR here will be ready except the one of Mike. So plan would be to do a beta release in a week and to do a candidate release. The end of April, and so that for beginning of May we do the release.
That's
If
for
every-
3.4.0.
Yeah, 3.4.0. Yeah. That's
Should the ones that are merged already be checked on those checkboxes, or do the checkboxes represent some other doneness state?
Yeah, I was not knowing when I did the issue, like what will be the purpose of the check. And the thing is, yeah, the idea was to backport them, but there are no 3.x branch yet, neither. So, but I could decide, or we could decide of using them for another meaning. It's same for me.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious. I wasn't nitpicking.
So, okay, so if everybody agrees, then that will be the plan, and I will take care then of creating the branch. I will wait for creating the branch. Yeah, I will wait a week, so I will create the branch just before starting the release to avoid the need of new backport to 3.3.x and 3.4.x, because I know that that's the point of Eric that cannot present it, but he plans to do some patch release for 3.3.x tomorrow. So in case there are some still in the coming days, then we don't need to backport them too much. Okay, thanks, people. Then I have a couple of other points. Is Jeremy there? I don't know. I think we have some error on the CI by time to time. So I've pushed a PR for being able to customize the toolbar of the file browser. Mainly to be able to reuse that features on the classical notebook, so on the notebook v4. The trouble with that is the plugin in which the toolbar is defined is not the same as the one in which the comments of the file browser are defined. And so we are facing a race condition. And if the file browser is added to the shell before the comments are defined, then it's failing to find the icon linked to the comment. And so the buttons are displayed with a text and not with the icon. I've seen that only on the CI, but I presume it may happen also on the for the user. And I don't really know what's the best solution for that.
Can we make the file browser extension browser that defines commands be an optional dependency of the sidebar one? Oh wait, optional dependencies. I can't remember if it'll wait or if they.
Yeah.
Basically, can we make it the kind of dependency that makes it work, whether it's optional or not?
The question is it possible to do that even when there are no token provided by one plugin to another one? Because
Well,
in this case,
we can provide a plugin, right? Just to make that be the case. We'll make the other one provide a token that doesn't have an API. It's just a token so that you know it exists.
Okay, so that doesn't, okay, that there's no side effects. For you,
well, it's a change. It's an API change, but it's an additive API change, so it won't be backward compatible because nobody was depending on it before. So we can add that pre 4.0, make it a dependency of the other one, and guarantee that the dependency injection respects that dependency then.
Okay, then I will propose a PR with that solution. And the last one, forget. Oh yeah, I think it's it was more for not forgetting to bring the subject, because I think there hasn't been much discussion on the issue. Let me share my screen again. Piyush opened like 2 weeks ago a discussion about a new repository for data registry. The question was a good place where to move that exploratory repository. Knowing that Brian commented later that there are some restrictions coming from Amazon on which kind of organization is needed. And so I think it would be nice if like some other people want to comment of what's the status, because I know in the past we've had a couple of extension directly in JupyterLab, but organization, but I don't know if we had some early like experimental repository, although there are some kind of thing like Monaco editor, thinking out loud, sorry. So yeah, don't hesitate to comment. The idea really of, I think, and the question from Piyush and Brian is JupyterLab organization the good place for creating that new repository? And they just want agreement on that, I think. Maybe Jason knows a bit more as it's the only AWS around here today, I think.
Is Piyush not on the call? I thought
I'm here.
Oh, good. Sorry, Piyush, I missed you.
Yeah. So I did see Brian's comment. I actually was not aware that AWS has this restriction. So Brian probably knows more about this. But yeah, if anyone had any feedback on that, how do we move forward for this? Feel free to comment on this issue.
Can I ask, is the Data Explorer project, will it continue to exist after Data Registry, or is this really just the next version? Like, could we simply rename Data Explorer to Data Registry?
Yeah, this is the next version. And I think that was the idea, because there's really not much from the earlier code base that we're gonna incorporate in this version. So if renaming is the solution, then we can definitely work with that.
Well, if we don't want people installing a deprecated package, and if this is a clear successor package, renaming, I think, is not a bad option. I think somebody was saying something, sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering what's stopping us from just making another repo with the new name, with the new content, and just letting the old one exist where it is. Because it sounds like this is a spiritual successor more than like a direct code successor. So is there a reason it can't just be in its own repo?
It could be, but at that point, we should probably archive the one we don't want people to install and be confused by.
Yeah, yeah. I just, maybe it's the Git OCD in me, but the idea of completely replacing a code base with new code as part of the same repo, that just, I guess it irks me in the wrong way from a Git cleanliness perspective, when you essentially just like say, oh yeah, it's the same repo, but we're completely replacing the code, which is understandable that we need to completely replace the code with this new version, but that feels like it shouldn't necessarily be a continuation of the current Git repo from a Git perspective.
That's interesting, because I think of Git almost exactly the opposite, as I want the whole history of a thing. Even if one day you decided to rewrite the extension in Fortran, I still want to see the original JavaScript version before the new Fortran version. So anyway, that's a philosophical debate we don't have here.
That's a good counterpoint to that. So yeah, as I said, no strong opinions, just open question on why we were specifically tunneling on just doing a full code complete, like wipe. Oh, the issues, the issue tracking. No, that's actually, Vidar just posted in the chat about it's also for issue tracking. That's actually a really good reason to just keep the repo and potentially rename it. So not thinking of it as Git, but thinking of it as GitHub.
Okay, what would help?
I'd be cool with keeping it and renaming it.
Well, what would help unstuck Piyush? Like, Piyush, what do you need to go forward? You need to know the end repository state.
Yeah, I'm not blocked at this point, but I think to move forward with this question, I think I think people are suggesting that's rename, right? That's what you're suggesting. So is that a rename? Is there a button somewhere in GitHub that I should go and just rename, or how does that work?
Yeah, if you go into the settings of a repo, you can rename it and it'll give you big bright red warnings, but will allow you to do so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you need to be an admin level, not committer level though, to do that.
Got it. So I'll work with Vidar or other admins too, I think. Go forward with that. Okay, thank you. I think that solves it.
Just one last thing, like only 3 of us spoke and Vidar added stuff in the chat. Do we agree? Is this okay? Does anyone object?
The current proposal being just to rename the existing repo that's already in the JupyterLab org to a different
Yes.
name.
Right.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, cool.
Sounds good. Thank you.
And that was all for me. Thank you very much.
Cool. Thanks, Fred. Eric cannot join meeting today. Plan to cut a patch release 3.3.3 tomorrow. Cool. Thanks, Eric. Alex, you're up.
Yes, I have a quick demo / pitch. This is a little bit of code that I wrote in my work with Elira. And I wanted to kind of share it with everybody and see how people feel about this feature and see if it's something that I might want to move into core. It's a standalone extension right now. I've nicknamed Code Viewer. We have released it as part of Elira as of last week. But if we moved it into core, it would probably just be a command that gets bundled into something like the file editor. So right now, you can't open the editor for files that don't exist. So for instance, you have a chunk of code and you want to display it to the user, you would have to persist it to open it in the file editor. So I created a way to open an editor that's, in this case, read-only, that is transient. It's not persisted anywhere on the system. So in this case, this is a definition YAML file for that node in our pipeline. The file gets returned by the server, but we didn't want to persist it, so we wanted to be able to display it. This is done by using a command that we register and call that just opens up the code viewer. The code viewer wraps our code editor instead of the file editor, since the file editor itself requires a file in the file system. So it's a cool way. It's also transient. It's extremely transient because if you open it again, it opens a second copy. Like it doesn't have a persisted ID of any sort. If I remember my implementation correctly, I actually randomized the ID for the widget. And it's transient. Like when it goes away, it's gone. So I wanted to show this to everybody and see if people thought that this was a feature that would be worth me putting in core before I do the legwork to actually put it in core. And if people think it should go into core, where should I put it into core? Because I have the widget file, and then I also have the command that has to be added in an index file somewhere. So yeah, I'm open to opinions and feedback.
So William has a question in the chat, and then after that, Lane has his hand up. William's question for people who are watching the video: what happens when you refresh your browser tab?
I'm pretty sure it will go away. Let me just double check that. So at one point, I actually called it transient viewer, specifically because the idea is it's transient. It's meant to be used to display something, so you don't have to display it in like a pop-up. With some legwork, we could add it to the restorer and like do the work to get it to get a persisted widget ID. But that would most likely require some sort of hashing, or possibly similar to the launcher, a way of just an incremental ID. So if restore is something that people think would be something we want if we added this to core, I could do the legwork to add that. But it was not something that we needed in our initial implementation, so it doesn't currently do it.
Lane, what were you going to say?
So right now, the default behavior when you create a text file is to create the untitled.txt file. So if you introduced this new feature that just opens it in memory, would you get rid of that old feature?
They actually work completely separate to each other, but we could add some sort of menu bar option or menu option that says then save as, and it could save the file. But as of now, it's completely separate from files. Like I essentially looked at how the file editor is implemented, and I just went up the class extension change until it no longer required a file being persisted. And then I extended that class. Oh, like refresh the screen? I did refresh. It goes away. So
Isabella had a question in the chat. Could I ask Alex to play the other side and say, Isabella, you can ask your question too, but say why we wouldn't want this. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it may be because where I'm coming from, but like a lot of the time I'm like, okay, what are the cons of having a new feature? Like, I'm not really sure, you know, is there a maintenance?
The cons in my mind are almost always bloat. Is this something that needs to be in core, or should it be a standalone third-party extension that somebody can install? Which it is currently. Even though I said this is part of Elira, we do publish this as standalone. You could just do a pip install Elira-code-viewer, and it would pip install this, and the command would be available to you.
So it is purely additive, I guess would be my other question, right? Like, it doesn't sound like there's anything that this overwrites or undoes. Okay, thanks.
Would this extension replace any code that's currently in JupyterLab? Like, is there a part of lab where you think, oh, this is a perfect use of code viewer instead of the way we're currently doing it?
I don't believe so. I'd call this 100% additive. I don't think it would make sense to replace anything we currently have. Though, if we decide to extend this with some of those functionalities that people pitched, those functionalities may end up being implemented that way. Like, for instance, being able to like save as into the file system, how we handle that, and how we handle if they do a save as, it would probably need to be reopened as a file editor. Because right now, you can't actually edit this. I'm typing on my keyboard. This is distinctly read-only. So, and I've had to disable the right-click, the built-in right-click, because the right-click functionality of the editor is tied to the file system. So, for instance, if you had a Markdown editor open in the background, it would give you the option to open up the preview for that Markdown editor, because, again, this is transient. And so it doesn't have a file persisted, and we've actually tied in the context menu of file editor, of the editor directly into the directory structure again. The read-only editor in the debugger. I am not aware of that. How does that read-only editor work, Vidar?
So in the debugger sidebar, there are a few panes. The lowest pane in the right-hand corner will show you the code that you are currently stopped in, if you're stopped in a breakpoint and stepping through code. And that is displayed in an editor that is file-backed, but the file often isn't actually contained in the root that you launch your server from, because it could be a transient file that was created on the fly for use by the debugger and sitting in the temp directory, or it could be library code that comes from your sysprefix or something.
Okay, that sounds like it's a similar solution to the same problem as I was trying to solve with this. So it could be that we might actually want to leverage something like this in the debugger then. So the debugger doesn't have to create that temp file if it doesn't want to.
It actually, the temp file is required on the server side because because in order to do debugging, you need to give it a Python file. So the debuggers for both IPyKernel and Zeus Python create temporary Python files that they feed to the debugging library that they use. So it isn't exactly analogous to the situation that the code viewer solves. It's a little bit different, but it was, I mean, I thought of it as well. It does seem, it's in the same universe, but it is slightly different in that they need to have a file. However, those files are not always accessible via the file contents API. They're coming from somewhere else. Yeah, that's what Vidar just said in the chat.
Yeah, then that, yeah, it sounds like that was essentially a different solution to the same problem. In fact, we could have probably done that to solve our problem in Elira rather than writing this. But I do believe they can fit different use cases, even though our Elira problem actually could have been solved with that solution instead.
So maybe what you can do is create a Team Compass issue and call a vote on whether we should bring this package into core. Unless there's like
that was actually one of my questions, is whether or not it should be brought in as a package, or if this should just be included in an extension we already have, because it is just a widget definition and a command, and then defining a command in an index. So in theory, this doesn't have to actually be its own package in core. It could just be put into a package that already exists as a command.
Looking at the code, it's really lightweight.
Yeah, it is. I worked really hard to make it as lightweight as I possibly could.
Adding it to the editor package as a fileless editor or something like that, like, I think it sounds great.
Yeah, the file editor package was my best guess, but I just didn't know, because the actual widget itself, I think, belongs in the code editor package, but that doesn't have an associated widget. So I was unsure of which extension index file we'd want to add the creation of the command to, if that belongs in the file editor, given it's loosely related, but the whole point is to open the code viewer without having a file. So, but at the same time, we don't typically, most people don't disable and override the file editor. So like if anybody's running JupyterLab, that's going to be there.
So if you took Jason's approach and added another exported class to the file editor package, would this be simply a regular PR to core, or would it be something like you're bringing along license files and stuff? Yeah,
just be a regular.
In that case, that's not a Team Compass issue. That's more like just create a JupyterLab issue saying, hey, I want to create this kind of thing. What do you guys think? And if you get enough thumbs ups on it, then open the PR for it.
Cool. Then that's what I'll do. And I'll retroactively put that in the agenda for people to find. Cool. Thanks for the feedback.
Thanks, Alex. Jason W.
Okay. Well, the topics that I put in the agenda, it seems like have already been addressed. 3.3.3 and 3.4.0 release date expectations. I kind of summarized what was said earlier, so please correct me if I'm wrong, that 3.3.3 is expected tomorrow, the 7th, 3.4.0 early May. And then on the cell toolbar stuff, got some great feedback from Frederick, and some code samples that I incorporated with some other changes. So there are a couple of automated tests that are failing. I am not 100% sure whether my code is related to that. So that's like the only other area of uncertainty. But if anyone else could take a look at that pull request, I'd appreciate it.
Cool.
That's all I
Thank
got.
you, Jason.
Isabella is up next.
Cool. I similarly just have two kind of announcey things. One, a couple weeks ago, I brought up that I was trying to solve an issue for JupyterLab citations, and we were like, we don't have a process. Open something on the JupyterLab Team Compass. So I did. There is now an issue on the JupyterLab Team Compass. I moved a lot of the notes that we took from there about like options that we could take. I'm not sure how to move it forward because this is not the kind of thing that I should be making singular decisions on. So I'm letting you all know. It's not urgent, but it would be nice to have it so we can close the existing issues and any future issues, because I know this has come up a few times, like people post this issue periodically, so it'd be nice to answer them. Yes, so that's happening. And what was my other thing in here? Oh, we have our accessibility meeting 15 minutes after this one today. Hooray. Feel free to join in. So I think that's all from me unless anyone has questions.
Cool. Thank you. We've reached the end of the agenda. Before we jump into additional discussions, if there was anybody who wanted to say something and did not update the agenda, now's your moment to shine. All right. You know, I've been training to do as long a pause as I can because I hate awkwardness. So yeah, that was like exercise for me. Mike, what's up?
Just on the point that Isabella raised, I suggested that we could get a Zenodo toy, which would be just a single click on the JupyterLab repository, and wanted to ask, possibly as a discussion, what we think about this.
When I look at the example you gave on the issue for the Python pillow project, how do they get the list of authors for that DOI?
I believe that this is the list of committers of users who have committed in the past.
And so then the overall DOI is like a comprehensive list of all committers?
Just make sure I didn't do anything wrong.
Question mark. Do you know if that's automatic?
So at each release, when a release gets stacked, there is a hook which creates a new identifier for each release. So it's integrating with GitHub very well, but I'm not currently sure how the authors are added. I believe that this is based on the committers, and that it will be list of all users who have committed up to this point. I'm, however, not sure how the org ID or CID is getting connected to the authors.
My main question, just hearing that, would be like, could we, or would we be able to, and would we want to have any kind of like manual override? Like, I know, for example, some projects just like, because committers is just the code contribution, sometimes people like to do either additional things or a more vague, like something I see a lot is like Project Jupyter. Like I think our MIT license has like project or like JupyterLab contributors as like a title instead of like listing people. I don't know if that's of interest. I don't know if that's possible, but that's something to consider. I can go write that on the issue too. I didn't get to it yet.
I just logged into Zenother and I see that I can edit and manually add authors or remove authors, even if they were fetched via GitHub, and I can add the identifier for them. Though this could be very cumbersome if we have hundreds of releases in JupyterLab. This is like technical thing, how that will work. So maybe we should just try and see whether that works.
Yeah, I agree. My main thought is if we were to do it manually, my guess would be we would use the same language in the license that just says generally and doesn't list specific people. That would be my instinct from a maintenance perspective as well.
I like the idea of a DOI per release plus an overall DOI, which is, I think, what's provided by this system, because then you can cite a specific release that you're using, or you can cite the project at large, depending on sort of what you were trying to cite. That does dilute the citation rank, so yeah, that's a disadvantage of that, but it does help things be more precise. And I think maybe we should encourage people to cite the overall DOI and just put version whatever, just so it doesn't dilute the citations across all the versions.
Okay. Is that sufficient in terms of, okay, cool. Thank you, Isabel.
I'm just can I just call for comment? Because there's several people here that have been professors and in the academic community, and the academic community is who I think of when I think of people doing citations. What's your take on people that have done a lot of citations and done a lot of papers? All right, that was a long pause too, Darian. Oh, go ahead.
I'll just say that this Zenodo thing with the pillow example looks really impressive and cool. And I mean, yeah, for the reasons you stated, it's really cool that it shows you specific authors for a release and then all of the authors, and has the ability to cite either a specific release or all releases. I mean, and the UI looks nice. So that's cool. It's an important thing to do in academia.
Okay. Should we move on to additional discussions? That sounds like a yes. There are two questions here. I would like to answer them backwards because one of them has an answer. What is the current status of uploading recorded dev meetings to YouTube? The status is so dumb that I feel embarrassed to say it on a recorded call, but I know that recorded call is not going to be on YouTube, so don't worry about it. But no, it will eventually be on YouTube. I tried to sign into Zoom, and I'm signed into Zoom right now as Project Jupyter, but the videos are uploaded to the cloud, Zoom's cloud. So I need to sign into the Zoom web UI. The Zoom web UI sent a two-factor authentication to a Project Jupyter email whose credentials I don't have. And everyone that I've asked also doesn't have it. So I just, right now, I'm sending a message to the steering council saying, whoever has it, please add it to the password vault. And then this problem will go away. This is my fault. I'm sorry. But that's the answer to that discussion question. Okay, Fred, let's talk about web components.
Hey, me again with the same subject as the last 2 weeks. So sorry, Jason, you missed the demo that are on the video, I promise. So as talked about last week, I think the best was to open some discussion. I created the issue, but so far nobody has commented on that. So I don't know, either we can do some kind of question answer session about that. I don't know what's the best path forward, because I think like the first step on that subject is for people to understand, to get their own understanding on the technology and the implication for the project. So yeah, I could again do a brief introduction of what I have done if needed.
I think most of the people on the call have seen a version of this, but it would be nice if you just maybe share your screen with that demo page you had up while we talk about it, just in case people are unfamiliar. I think the main thing that it comes down to is, do we have some sort of consensus on whether to go ahead and adopt this as the official UI toolkit we want users, extension authors to use, basically? And if that's the case, do we want to start grafting it into the current UI, like bringing those things forward, swapping components, that kind of thing? It's a big step, it's a big change, and it's a new dependency. All of those things mean we need to have discussion about it, but we haven't actually discussed that much. Despite this being the third time we're talking about this, there hasn't been enough back and forth, I feel like. So I don't know, people, you've had this idea percolating in the back of your minds, at least on some level, for the past few weeks. What are people who maybe haven't spoken up about this thinking?
I mean, just to try to play devil's advocate to get the conversation going, does anyone think it's too much tooling or too much overhead for something like new contributors? I mean, would it make things easier for new contributors?
I think it might make things easier for someone who wants to construct an extension from pre-existing pieces. I think that on a technical level, this feels like a win. I think the real questions are, do we want to rely on these specific libraries and make an investment of time and effort and code longevity on them, right? Because pieces of code that we write using these components might be there 5 years from now, might be there longer. Look at how long the classic notebook UI has lasted, for example. And so is it a sound investment to make? Yeah, William.
I have a little question about the scope of the components. For example, could it be that IPy widgets would use these components instead of the, I guess, current components that it uses? Like how broad in the Jupyter ecosystem might these components be used?
I may answer that. So there is a JEP open to suggest it to be, if adopted at the Jupyter level, to be used more broadly. That doesn't mean it needs to be used everywhere. And I think for every project, the discussion will be needed. Personally, I will love it, but I know that other people have, for good reason, will have other opinion. And so I don't think it should be mandatory for especially for the widget, as the user is already far from the styling and the DOM when he's using the widget. I think like if it gets adopted outside of JupyterLab, the best other candidate is probably the interface of Jupyter Hub for trying to have a more consistent ecosystem, and maybe then for IPy widget, knowing that probably a good path will be first to have it as an extension that bring widgets that are built on top of that, but are not the official ones. And then maybe if people think that, okay, that's good to make them official, then maybe let's merge that third-party extension to become the official standard. But Jason may have a better point of view on that one.
I think it's not a clear given, considering that in IPy widgets, we worked really hard to stay with the basic HTML form controls for most everything, with a few exceptions. And the idea there was very easy cross-browser compatibility, accessibility, typically out of the box, because we're using just straightforward HTML form controls. And the scope of IPy widgets is the core controls is deliberately limited for that reason, to make it simpler to maintain, to make it cross-browser compatible, et cetera. But we also do provide a number of tweaks that you can do with the styling that may mess up the styling of these widgets. So it's not a given. I think that IPy widgets moves to these, but I think Frederick, that's a good plan to go ahead. We can it's easy to make a third-party IPy widgets library, just like we have for Material UI, just like we have for other widget frameworks. And then let's see and have the conversation about whether we want to replace the core controls with these. It certainly looks nice, the demo.
So another question is, how much size does these runtime dependencies add to the bundle? Do you know roughly the order of magnitude these packages add to the compiled bundle?
Forgot to look again. Let me just bundle quickly to give you an answer. I'm live for building the toolkit version that's building to standalone asset using rollup. So yeah, that's the size.
So the size that you're showing us, what is it the size of? Is it the size, like, I guess a question I have is, suppose you have an extension authored with these components and that extension is grafted into JupyterLab versus an extension that has the same components but implemented, with HTML or with Lumino or something that already ships for free. What's that size difference? Is that what you're showing us, or I don't really know what these numbers indicate?
Yeah, that will be the additional size that will add to JupyterLab.
I see. Okay.
Knowing that we'll start losing weight when we start ourselves replacing elements from the core with them, because we could drop some codes, we could drop some styles. So not to say that we'll at the end reach 0.
And then as Nick pointed out, the other comparison is versus Blueprint that we had as a dependency previously.
Yeah, but I don't want to do that.
No, I don't mean that you should figure out the number, but I mean that would be
that's
the kind of the bar to compare it with.
Yeah, but Blueprints is very bad because it was barely tree shaked, and so it's like Blueprints was 3 megabytes without the icons.
Right, so that's just a comparison point then for anybody curious.
Jason has his hand up. What's up?
In the past, Pete has advocated for web components, but with a caution that web components have this global namespace in the browser. And so you can have 2 different libraries that package, they're the same web component library, and then they stomp on each other in this global namespace. And here you're repackaging even a library that's already out there. First of all, is that understanding correct? And 2, can you just address like how you're thinking about these things and how you're working around this global namespace issue?
I think it was 2 weeks ago, I did a demonstration installing on purpose on the same JupyterLab multiple extension using the toolkit, with in each extension a different version of the toolkit being pinned. So what happened is only one version of the library got, so you lose the control of which one will get it. But with the Webpack Federation, only one extension get the underlying Microsoft library loaded. Actually, there are 2 libraries from Microsoft, and actually in the demo, I didn't got into the detail, but one part came from one extension and the other one come from the other extension. And it worked in the sense that it was not major version change. So there were no conflict. What happened is that the styling of the element was not the latest, because the one that make it finally wasn't the latest version. But no, I didn't encounter any error. And I think also just because only one version was really used at the end. It's just we lose control of which version. What won't be the case if it's in the core, because if it's in the core, then we can do as React. We can make sure through the federation that we control which version is used. Yeah.
And in particular, I think.
1 second, I'm sorry. Because there's only 2 minutes left till the top of the hour and people will go, I'm going to stop the recording now in case there's something somebody needed to say off the record, and then we can continue the conversation.